Discovering Alabama is a production of the Alabama Museum of Natural History.
Alabama's blackland prairie, rich, fruitful soils, lush, verdant forests, sparkling, mighty rivers.
Hi, I'm Doug Phillips, and this is some of the world's most fertile ground.
This is the Black Belt, that crescent of dark earth that sweeps across Alabama. It was here that early Alabama found its wealth and power. And it is here that modern Alabama finds some of its most abject poverty.
Ironically, today's poverty can be traced back to yesterday's wealth, and so often discussion of the Black Belt dwells on that connection. We can't deny that connection, but it might be time to put a bit more emphasis on how the Black Belt will connect with Alabama's future.
There are many, many men and women here who still love the land and have great hope for their lives and the lives of their children. Many have dedicated themselves to improving this world for those who will come after them.
No, we can't deny the poverty, the needs here in the Black Belt. But we shouldn't overlook the courage, the creativity, the enthusiasm of folks who are working to meet those needs. Join me for a look at some new ideas, new ideals that are taking shape here in the Blackland Prairie.
This program is about a land unknown to many people, a land that in many ways has maintained its native natural wonders, a place of bountiful backcountry, forests, streams, and wildlife more diverse than can be found in much of the inhabited world. Come along with me as we explore the wild wonders of this land. Come along as we discover Alabama.
Welcome to Discovering Alabama, and welcome to the Black Belt. We've done other shows featuring the Blackland Prairie. In those shows, we looked at how the region's natural history gave rise to its cultural history.
We saw how the region draws its name from the dark, loamy soils that sit atop the white Selma chalk. We saw how this belt of fruitful ground stretches across Alabama's coastal plain. From east to west, the band runs roughly from just below Auburn, through Montgomery, through Selma, broadening as it goes on into eastern Mississippi. We saw how the productive soils brought settlers from the east, and with them came King Cotton, the plantation system, and slavery. We saw how the Civil War put an end to slavery, but some would argue it did not abolish the plantation system.
We can gaze across the Blackland Prairie today and behold great ecological wealth, but that doesn't always translate into economic wealth for the men, women, and children who call this region home.
It is the region's natural history and rich dark soils that gave rise to the term Black Belt. But in modern times, this term is being redefined by our cultural history.
The Southern Black Belt is a concept that started with some rural sociologists at North Carolina State University, and now there is a consortium, the Southern Black Belt Consortium, that includes a lot of universities. What their map shows is that in the 2000 census, there were 30 million African Americans. 15 million of them live in the old states of the Confederacy. The counties with 40% or more African Americans are, with 2 or 3 exceptions, all in the South. That is also the area where the greatest number of the social, economic, political problems that we've talked about exist.
It isn't going to be something that the federal government's going to be able to come to the rescue with, or the state government, which is broke, is going to be able to come to the rescue with. It's going to take a collaborative effort, and I don't think there's a single pill that we can take, if you will, that's going to solve this crisis.
Obviously, the whole question of leadership and how we come together as community. You know, I've worked in probably 30 counties in Alabama over the years, and the key is when you can create the kind of synergy in a community where people want to work together, to want to look to the future.
Well, that is an enormous challenge, because I think the problem with a lot of our policy initiatives in this country, in terms of education, in terms of health care, you name it, is that we haven't recognized the uniqueness of some of our communities. We haven't recognized that there are areas that have specific and unique needs. You know, we talk about reforming Medicare, and we talk about bringing HMOs into the Medicare equation. We forget that in major parts of our region and major parts of our state, there are no HMOs anywhere in sight. We talk about federal mandates for school systems that are struggling to stay open and to pay their teachers.
It's difficult to gaze across this magnificent land and at the same time realize that the very term Black Belt has come to be synonymous with poverty. And this is not poverty that can be understood as just a lack of money.
This is a poverty that must be considered in the light of a lack of adequate housing, a lack of basic health care, and a lack of educational opportunity.
Fortunately, there are some innovative programs that are addressing these issues in the Black Belt. And all of these programs have at least one thing in common.
Quite honestly, I've never seen as greater acts of giving as I have in this particular community.
Our emphasis in the Department of Journalism has been moving for a number of years toward community journalism.
We focus on women in the community. We train volunteers in the community.
Programs that are making a difference in the Black Belt are those that are involving the people of the Black Belt at the grassroots level. Today we're going to take a look at 3 such programs. The first is the nationally renowned Rural Studio.
Operating from what they call the Red Barn, near the tiny town of New Bern, Alabama, the Rural Studio enables young architect students to live and work closely with citizens of the Black Belt. Together, they design and build homes, churches, and other needed structures both functional and appealing. Begun in 1993, the Rural Studio has since gained worldwide acclaim as it trains a new generation of citizen architects.
Building is an activity that is almost always in some way a gift to the person, of course, that will inhabit the building, but it's a gift to the community, and it stands as a kind of manifestation of that belief that, you know, there are things that we can do together that we can't do alone.
The personal contact is the most important part of this whole experience. I mean, quite frankly, whether it's the students interacting with each other and beginning to understand how to work in a team, or it's the client and the community contact.
So the whole room is like a big is waterproof.
Room. Oh, that's a blessing.
So she can wheel in, she can use the loo and use the sink. And
yeah.
There's been lots published about the Rural Studio, many pretty photographs taken about the projects, beautiful things, beautiful objects, but the true story is the relationships that are made and built out here. Lucy, she calls those students that built her house her little angels.
We know it just was a blessing just for to get the house. It's not just a project to us, it's our home, you know. There's a home, sweet home, because we count it as a blessing because it's something that we know we couldn't afford at the time. We could never afford just to build a house from the ground up.
It's, you know, the students don't do it because it makes them feel good. I think they honestly want to, it's an honest, like, they really want to be here and they really want to meet these people and become a part of their lives. The Rural Studio is always represented in that we're doing something for Mason's Bend, or we built Lucy a house, and so on and so forth. But we're an architecture school, first and foremost, always, and we're here, we're practicing our ideas. It's not something that we feel we're giving to this community. You know, I kind of feel that they're letting us be here and they're letting us invade their homes.
It shows you that everybody can work together. And a whole lot of times, the reason people think they can't work together is because of lack of communication.
You really get to know people. It's not superficial like it is in a city. Here it's, you know, we're right in front of each other every day. If I was to suggest one of the terrific things about the Rural Studio is it's come here and it's tried to make its home here. We have 3 staff who actually are from here. The teachers live out here. The people around here are our neighbours, and so it's not just us as a bunch of outsiders trying to kind of impose our thoughts and our ways on people here. What is done out here affects us because it's our community.
Architecture is not going to solve all the economic problems of the Black Belt, but what it can do is address the problems that the community and some people that live there in its own context. It's not sort of from afar. We're there on the ground working with people directly. And I think that's an important thing. But we also understand that we're not going to solve all the economic problems of that area. There is something, though, that I think we do that is not obvious. I think the program opens up a gravity of possibility. When people see that things can change, even in a small way, it provides a kind of momentum and a potentiality that is powerful.
What the Rural Studio is doing in teaching citizen architects, another program is doing in training citizen journalists. Dateline Black Belt is bringing the stories of the people of the Black Belt to the world.
It's more, we're 30 plus, and all of us do. We go around, we go to churches, talking about cancer, we go to PTO meetings, any gatherings, Baptist Association meetings, Sunday school conventions, whatever. Choir anniversary, we just try to make people aware.
To get the word out.
Get the word out, right.
Ordinary people are newsworthy. They've got things to say. They've got lessons that they've learned that they can share with the rest of the world. And so we believe that community journalism is really the future of journalism.
They don't drop the ball. They just keep things rolling.
Okay. We want the students to see what it is like to be a part of a community and to help to facilitate those stories, to tell those stories, to find those stories. So we want them to become better journalists. We want them to become better listeners. One of the communication skills that journalists are poorest at, we're told, is listening to what the public wants to be informed about. Well, let's turn the communication model around and put the emphasis on the receiver of information, and then let that receiver become a sender of information. Change those arrows. We've got a lot of young students that are working on this, and they haven't been indoctrinated into the know-it-all journalism society yet. So I think that they will work very well. And we'll find that there are lots of stories, and we'll see the power of storytelling. As we know, it is the way you define who you are is by the stories that you tell about yourself. It'll be truthful news, but it'll be news that has more long-term impact. News of success stories, and there are lots of success stories. News of how the people who did stay there make a living. What could be done to bring more people back to the Black Belt? Well, one of the ways that you can do this on the cheap is through the internet, and more people have access to the internet in the Black Belt, especially through their schools and through their institutions. We're not going to go down there and try to solve all the medical problems and all the road problems and all the jobs problems, but if we can get people talking with each other intelligently, and with accuracy and with interest about what's going on. We think that it'll be a gradual move toward making this part of the state more productive, more progressive, and better place to live.
Alabama's Blackland Prairie is a special place. The people that live here know that. Dateline Black Belt helps the local folks share their special place with the world. Sharing is also at the heart of a program that brings people together to help meet a different sort of need.
Cancer does not discriminate. It gets the richest among us as well as the poorest among us. It gets the most highly educated among us as well as the most illiterate among us. And if we're going to get a handle on it, we've got to find ways to involve all of those levels of society into our struggle.
The Deep South Network is a collaborative of several universities that have come together to train Black Belt citizens as community advisors to help address a particular challenge.
And the whole idea was to try to find new, novel ways to decrease death rates in cancer in underrepresented or underserved communities. And so the approach that was developed in Alabama and Mississippi was the community health advisor model.
So we identified, first of all, a person who lives in these communities to work for the university part-time who would assist us in identifying these natural helpers so they could be trained as community health advisors. To date, we have over 350 of these community health advisors here in the 11 counties of the Black Belt.
See, what's really central to this Deep South Network and the community health advisor is this whole concept of servant leadership, that you provide leadership through service. That's what it's all about. It doesn't mean that money is not important. It doesn't mean that ego is not important. It doesn't mean that material things are not important, but it means that they're secondary. It means what's primary is that an individual wants to provide service to his or her fellow man, fellow woman, and wants that to be counted. That's what's primary. The other things are secondary. And the basis of that has to be love. So that's central to what this whole thing is about.
Deep South is like a family. And with being a family, it's love, it's concern, it's care.
We focus on women in the community. We train volunteers in the community so these women can relate to the women that they see at the ball games or in the grocery store. And I think that will be the success for any program, to begin in the community and work. It will be the community that will ultimately solve its own problems.
And when I can see programs like this come into the community and help us, then we just thank God for it, because that don't happen every day.
People have to assume responsibility for taking care of themselves, but they have to be given the opportunity and some support. And I think with those combinations, I think it allows the genius and creativity that are in these communities to flow up, because that's where the real solutions are, but that's where the responsibility is too.
My heart is filled with pain. I've been through the storm and rain, yeah, but I made it. Praise God. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Oh, I made it.
programs like this Black Belt Cancer Awareness Rally are very important because it allows us an opportunity to, one, to educate women here in the communities or surrounding neighborhoods about the importance of early detection and screening. We couple it with things that are part of our community, such as song, personal sharing of stories and testimonies, and having a keynote speaker. And then we also include our partners, vendors, and it serves as a means of getting information out to communities that may not be able to reach through traditional methods.
Been through the storm and rain, yeah, but I made it. Praise God.
The spiritual component and people's relationship with or their acknowledgement of God or the lack thereof of God for those folks who don't believe is very much a part of who we are, because in the African American community, our faith is so essential to our healing process, to our deliverance process, and so because it is, we acknowledge it.
I made it. Sometimes I have been through the storm, but I made it. Sometimes without a peace of mind. Oh, you child made it.
While there has been economic poverty in the Black Belt, there's no poverty of human spirit. Here today are many examples. The Rural Studio, Dateline Black Belt, and the Deep South Network are just three, demonstrating a strong spirit of caring cooperation.
There is a lot of political talent in the Black Belt. There's a lot of talent in the business community, a lot of talent in the ministerial community. A lot of educators are doing a wonderful job. These are people who are fighting the hard work and the battle every single day.
As others have said, we won't come from Washington or come from Montgomery with the solutions. We have to look for the solutions with the people who live in those towns, and then we have to be in a position to respond to them and be a partner with them.
I think that we have to recognize as people of faith that we do have obligations to each other. It's so fashionable now for a lot of politicians to talk about their faith, but one essential element of faith is the obligations that we have as God's children toward each other. It's an obligation that cuts across racial lines, economic lines, religious lines, because we all breathe the same air, as John F. Kennedy once said. We all share the same human experience, and as people of faith, we ought to recognize that we have bonds that are far more powerful than any of the artificial things that separate us.
No, we can't deny the poverty and the other needs of the Black Belt. But as we've seen, with courage, creativity, and enthusiasm, many folks are cooperating across this land with a spirit of commitment for a fruitful future.
Discovering Alabama is a production of the Alabama Museum of Natural History, the University of Alabama. This program is supported by grants from the Solon and Martha Dixon Foundation, the Alabama Wildlife Federation, working for wildlife since 1935, the Alabama Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, State Lands Division, and Legacy, Partners in Environmental Education.